In this 15 minutes or so, I'd like to discuss a couple of points with you before handing over to Suki. First of all, Luminus, what is this company about? Second, what is our problem statement? What is it that we're trying to sort out? 3, why did we end up with SingleStore? How did we make that decision, that selection decision? And then zooming in on our project, our first phase deliverable, what is our system of reference? How does it look like? How does it work with SingleStore? And last but not least, what's the way forward? And after that, I'll hand over to Suki to take us more into the details of the SingleStore offering. So if you can go to the next one, Suki, and to the next one. So at Luminus, we try to work to a CO2 neutral energy future, whereby we offer 3 distinct aspects. We produce electricity, we supply energy, that's power and gas. We offer solutions to accommodate for that, and whilst doing so, we embrace 3 core values, which is working together, which is putting our customer first, and which is focusing on entrepreneurship. You see innovation popping up there, and innovation is actually a nice lead into this entire project, which is not only innovative, but it also helps building our neutral energy future. If we can go to the next one, Suki. So a bit more data this time. So we're the 2nd largest electricity producer and the 2nd largest supplier of electricity and natural gas in Belgium. In numbers, that means that we have a market share of around 20%. We have 2,100 employees working for the group, and we have a 2,300 megawatt installed capacity asset park. You see there, you might not be familiar with it, but you see there the 4 basic traditional elements of having a electricity generation asset park, which is thermal, wind, nuclear, and hydro. We have all 4 of them in a very interesting mix, as I will elaborate on a little bit later in the slides. If you can go to the next one, Suki. So what is our problem statement? It all appears at once. You can click once more. Yeah. So basically, the world as we see it through the eyes of an energy producing company looks like this. We have outside wholesale markets, we have energy markets that operate 24/7 on all kind of different energy products. We have, of course, a portfolio of customers at the right, both B2B and B2C. We have at the left hand side, of course, our assets, our generation assets, our power plants. And last but not least, this is a physical world, so we work on physical networks who all have their own bespoke requirements, processes, and functionalities. Now, the crucial thing for an energy company like Luminus is to optimize these flows. These are opportunities in all directions, going to the 4 different angles. And in order to optimize those aspects and those flows, we actually have put in place a data foundation. We call it single version of the truth, with SingleStore, on top of which we are building a robust and future-proof IT solution. So in the end, this is our optimization cycle. It looks a bit like asset and liabilities management in a bank, but in this case, it's of course physical, because the energy world is still physical. And the main project is around having the capabilities to do the optimization to a very big extent in a real-time mode, bringing value to not only the customers, but also to Luminus as well, of course. Can go to the next one. So why did we come up with SingleStore? Well, first of all, because of specific time series functionalities. We're looking for a time series database. Our world can be translated into time series. That's what we were looking for. That's fairly specific to a large level of detail, both on volumes, but also on travel in time. So we're comparing data sets, we're aggregating data sets over a large volume of data points and over a fairly large volume or amount of time as well. We next one, we of course like to integrate this functionality because we have a lot of business processes using those data sets and those time series, which means that performance and reliability is key. That's not just on having calculation speed and being able to do large volume handling, but of course also on scalability. We scale up and we scale out. That's an absolute requirement. Our world is changing. We increase our assets on an ongoing basis. So that is very important for us. and leads us, of course, to, as I said before, this is a 24/7 operation mode we're in, so we absolutely need a support and maintenance capacity around it to make sure that these operations are actually respecting the physical needs of our customers, but also of our electricity grids that we're operating on. Next one is very trivial. Security, of course, what we're putting into this context is basically the inside out of an entire energy company. So this needs to be treated with the appropriate security. And stemming from that and looking at the, and I'm coming back to that point in a minute, of course, we need to be able to run analytics. Our data is more and more streaming, is more and more real-time streaming. So the capacity or the capability we need to look beyond what we currently do with our data set for future value adding processes and calculations is absolutely key. And all of this would, of course, not happen if there wouldn't have been an appealing commercial offer to put this in place to make sure that the opportunities that we see in the markets around us or in the sector around us can be put into commercial value for Luminus. So next one. So first of all, what is our system of reference? This is, apologies, a bit of a odd-looking IT table, and that's exactly what it is. So I built it up from the bottom up. So we have our time series database, which is in SingleStore, on top of which we added a business data layer, and we use all the standard IT slang of today with CQRS and authentication and event based design with an integration layer on top of it. So this is basically the heart of our optimization cycle. If you remember the first diagram where the 4 arrows were pointing at all the interactions we had with the world around us, then this is the heart of it. This is the heart of our optimization cycle. This is what we're working with, and this is exactly where SingleStore comes in as the key cornerstone piece of that architecture and of that implementation. To the left, very briefly, we are not done. We have defined the principles. We've defined data schemas, selected technology, SingleStore to deploy this, and we are now implementing this and making sure that our existing processes, not all of them are to be renewed, some of them are, but that our entire set of operational processes will work with this single version of the truth concept with our central data store. Yeah, next one. And you can go to the next one. Yeah. So this is what we're doing today. Tomorrow, of course, the world will look even more different. What you see here is basically at the left side of the screen, you would see the typical industrial energy setting. It's kind of already modern because you have heat and cold distribution systems next to the traditional energy production. You have battery parks, etc. So if you look at the left-hand side, that's the traditional B2B environment that we're already working in. Now, what we see is that the differentiator of that aspect towards a B2C or a retail market that actually starts to dissolve. We're seeing more and more complex household installations with, of course, photovoltaics, but also batteries, also auto generation aspects in there. So in the end, what we see happening is that these local energy communities, which might even be one house, but it also might be a street or a couple of streets, that they act tomorrow as another market participant, as another player in this market, where then again, our optimization cycle that I've shown previously working for Luminus as a company and for some large industrial customers that we have, tomorrow will very likely represent an opportunity towards every single household out there, which will then require, of course, to exploit the capabilities of the setup to the maximum to make sure that we can run our optimizations at a very large scale. And we started from a couple of assets to a couple of thousands of assets if we calculate all the windmills in there. But then, sorry? Okay. But then, of course, the point is to do this now for millions of data points. We're looking at 2 million energy communities that are in our portfolio potentially. So this is the pushing the envelope part of our setup. This is the end of the spectrum as we see it right now. It will still change, I'm quite sure, but this is the ultimate goal which we're aiming at, to put this technology in place and represent opportunities towards all of our customers, including ourselves as Luminus, of course. I think this is the exact time and point to hand over to Suki to discuss the SingleStore offering in more detail.
Thank you, Philip. This is a little bizarre because I'm hearing myself for the first time on a headset with people looking at me. But it is always a privilege to stand up and talk about a successful project with a customer. So I really do want to thank Philip for his partnership and moving forward with SingleStore. I'm going to tell you a bit about what the technology is about. But before I do that, I'd love to kind of summarize what we see in terms of the move of databases into the cloud. We've seen, and we summarize this kind of shift into three kind of parts: a first era, second era, and a third era. And the biggest difference being between the first era and where we see ourselves today is a move back to SQL. So we started in the first era with kind of MySQL databases. These are designed as single node databases for very good scale-up style of technology and architecture. Second generation, and I was part of this, as in-memory key value pair databases, kind of predominantly non-SQL style of databases. So I'd say that kind of 7 years ago, lots and lots of people decided to put in place best of breed databases, a time series database, a in-memory key value pair database, a geo database for geodata, and picking and choosing a particular type of technology for that particular type of data set. Where we see ourselves today, SingleStore included, is a back to SQL almost, but almost kind of a circle back to where we started. I think there's a large-scale recognition that more than 90% of our data assets are still locked up into SQL relational databases, but many organizations want to take advantage of a cloud-native new SQL style of database, which is what SingleStore is. There is a problem with that best-of-breed approach, which is why SingleStore was created. Best of breed is fantastic, but you need many different people, many different teams, many different resources. It creates a multi-layered architecture in the data layer, and if something goes wrong, it's a real pain to go and have a look at what's gone wrong and where it's gone wrong. And all of this data typically at some point has to talk to each other. Whether you're running operational analytics or you're trying to combine the data for some regulatory reasons, at some point you typically have to copy data from one of these databases to another database. So whether it's all kind of deposited into a data warehouse or consolidated down into some kind of Hadoop cluster, everybody tries to then sync this data from these different systems into a single architecture at the end. But we see many different reasons for not running into this kind of best of breed approach. So SingleStore is a single database for data intensive applications. I'm not going to talk about some of our customers because we've already had Luminus kind of speak about why and how they've moved forward with SingleStore. There's some really interesting customers, different verticals, different organizations, different use cases. Luminus have spoken about real-time operational analytics to support their energy trading strategy, but that's just one use case in many different verticals. We can rerun or provide the same capability for different organizations. So what is SingleStore? What's so great about it? Why is it so different? Typically, you would see a separate database for OLTP, kind of transactional database systems, and then on the other side you would actually have a separate database for analytics, a data warehouse or a slice and dice data warehouse. We're not an analytics tool or an analytics capability. We provide access, high speed, low latency access to this data. And what we're doing, quite unique, is we have this concept of universal storage, which under the covers, the technology is providing the best of breed approach to an in-memory row store capability combined with an optimized disk store, com store database. So without knowing it, the analytics tools or the applications that are getting data from SingleStore are actually getting data. It could be either in memory or optimized on disk. But the users of this data don't get to know that. The beauty is they get to leverage the best of breed of both of these worlds. So it's quite a unique architecture. We have this concept of universal storage, and if you're a database architect, you create a table in SingleStore, and we're the technology that manages whether that behavior of that table is for an in-memory operational table, or is it a slice and dice table for analytics? So that's quite unique in the way we're doing this. Why do people choose SingleStore? Three S's for speed, scale, and SQL. One thing I would like to kind of highlight on this chart on the right-hand side, we're a unified database, a multi-modal database, and like Luminus, one of the reasons architects will choose to go with SingleStore is that we're allowing time series data, geo data, key value pair data, all to be mapped into a relational, highly distributed new SQL database, and you can run full text search on all of that data. So you can pull into here JSON data, and we will map that semi-structured data into tables and allow you to mix and match that data and run standard SQL and ANSI SQL compliant queries over this data. Why do we refer to data-intensive applications? Really kind of three capabilities. Ultra-fast ingest. So what we're doing is we take Kafka streams, messaging integration streams, and without kind of taking them through independent layers of ETL or OLTP operational databases, those streams come directly into the database. So a Kafka stream, we have Kafka pipelines. Those Kafka pipelines are depositing data directly into SingleStore. They're writing that data into SingleStore whilst the analytics is being run on top of that data. Whilst streams of data are writing into the database, we don't lock the tables. And again, this is quite unique, patented, depending on where you come from. A technology which means we have multi-version currency control at a row level. So as analytics, as high concurrency applications are looking at this data, we're not locking any of that data out for anybody. So ultra-fast ingest, low latency, high concurrency are the three kind of characteristics of the types of applications that want to take data out of SingleStore. Just kind of rushing through this, three ways in which organizations will consume SingleStore. This kind of strategy of a BAM, of either kind of building something out from greenfield, and that's what we did with Luminus. It was a greenfield project. Augment, there might be many different database technologies, tools that you have in there, some kind of legacy MySQL, Snowflake, any style of data architecture that you want to keep in place, but actually provide a high-speed operation analytics layer on top of that as an augmentation strategy, or modernization. Because we're standard SQL, typically architects struggle with having to take data out of SQL databases and put it into non-SQL style of architectures. And the reason is you're frankly having to build a completely new data model and a completely different world in which to operate with that data. So what we provide is our businesses, the tools and the technologies to take this data and migrate it straight into SingleStore. So we are MySQL compliant, we're ANSI SQL compliant, and we allow you through sharding techniques to distribute the data from legacy databases into SingleStore, and we will distribute that data over a highly distributed relational backend, which is what SingleStore is. So that final strategy is modernization. So these are the three ways in which organizations will consume SingleStore. Some other examples of where we've done this. I'm not going to go into too much details, but you can see some of the organizations, some of the customers we have in each of these areas. Database consolidation is probably one of the biggest use cases that we target right now. So a mix and match of legacy architectures moving into a single unified SingleStore architecture. Why do people do this? It's quite simple. We provide maybe 10, 100x the performance at a third of the cost of legacy systems, and that's why organizations will opt to choose for this new SQL style of database. We are a mix of hybrid and multi-cloud, so that we're differentiated in the way organizations want to mix and match or move data from on-prem into a multi-cloud architecture. Finally, if you want to see this, I don't know why you can't see this slide. Here we go. Finally, I'd love for you to come and talk to us on the stand. We're here today. Or if you want to use this as yourselves, you can go and download a free trial version of the software, either on the cloud or self-managed. We don't restrict the software or the usage of that in any way, apart from how much data you store in memory. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your time. For the people that have actually physically come and sat here and listened to me, and Philip, who has agreed to kind of speak on our behalf as well.
Well, before you go, we've got a question actually. People are using Slido slowly. Thank you so much. So the first question I have is, you spoke about the importance of SQL. How much of a decision and an impact did that have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, Philip, you can hear me. Would you like to go with that first? You know,
Yeah, I can hear you. Well, briefly, we operate energy assets and many operational processes on them, so we don't like revolution that much, as we have a lot of knowledge on SQL already in-house, and for many years, of course, this is the aspect of evolution that we'd like to see, but I'm sure, Suki, from a technical perspective, you can illustrate that better.
Yeah, again, I kind of touched on this. We do see a big wholesale move back into a SQL style of usage in the database market, but in an architecture which is kind of cloud native, and it's hard to do because the reason why people moved away from SQL is because building a relational database which is highly distributed with all those relationships with data is pretty hard to do, and that's what we've solved with SingleStore, a highly distributed relational database that allow you to query that information and respond in sub-second timelines is pretty hard and complex to do, and that's what we've solved. So hopefully that gives a start of a 10 for answering that question.
No, it does.